Have you ever wondered why some people seem to pick up a new language almost effortlessly, while for others, it feels like a years-long struggle? Is it some kind of special talent they were born with? Or is there something else going on? Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the real science of what makes someone a great language learner.
So really, what is the secret sauce? Is it just raw talent? Does being a super outgoing person give you this massive head start? Or does it all just boil down to motivation? We're about to get into the research and separate what's real from what's just myth.
Okay, let's dive right in. The very first thing you need to know is there is no single magic bullet here. Success in language learning, it's like a complex equation. It's a whole mix of different factors, all working together. It is definitely not about just having the language gene. And here's where it gets really interesting, because we run into a classic challenge for researchers. Correlation is not causation. You see, we can observe that successful learners are almost always highly motivated. But did the motivation cause the success? Or did getting a few early wins and feeling that success actually make them more motivated? It's a total chicken and egg situation, and it's something super important to keep in mind as we go through all these different traits.
So let's start with the first huge piece of this puzzle, aptitude. The best way to think about this is like the cognitive hardware your brain is working with, the specific mental toolkit you've got for tackling a brand new language.
So what do we even mean by language aptitude? It is not some single mystical gift for languages, no way. Thanks to the work of researchers like John Carroll, we now know it's actually a whole cluster of specific, measurable cognitive abilities. And these abilities help predict just how quickly and easily someone's going to learn. And this slide breaks down exactly what's in that cluster. First, you've got phonemic coding. That's basically your ear for new sounds. Think about hearing the difference between similar-sounding words in a new language. Then there's grammatical sensitivity. This is your knack for just getting how sentences are put together, even if you couldn't write out the formal grammar rule. Next up is inductive learning, which is your inner detective, your ability to spot patterns and figure out the rules on your own. And finally, memory capacity, especially what's called working memory. That's your brain's power to hold on to new information just long enough to use it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that stuff only matters in an old-school grammar-focused class, right? Well, check this out. This finding from Leila Ranta is so cool. She discovered that even in modern communicative classrooms, where the focus is on talking, not memorizing rules, the students with that high analytic ability, that pattern-spotting skill, were still the most successful. So what that tells us is that this cognitive hardware, it matters no matter how you're being taught. All right, so we've talked about your brain's hardware, but that is only part of the story. Because if aptitude is the hardware, then motivation is the engine that actually drives this whole thing forward. It's the fuel that gets you through the inevitable tough spots. And you know, motivation isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Researchers usually talk about two main flavors. You've got instrumental motivation, which is when you're learning for a really practical reason, like to get a better job or to pass a test. And then you have integrative motivation. That's more personal. You genuinely want to connect with the culture or make new friends who speak the language. And here's the key takeaway. Both of them work. Both are incredibly powerful drivers. It doesn't really matter why you're motivated, just that you are. It's also really important to see that motivation isn't static. It's a process. It changes. It all starts with what's called choice motivation. That's the spark, the initial decision to say, okay, I'm doing this. But then comes the real test, executive motivation. This is the day in, day out grind of actually showing up and doing the work, especially when you don't feel like it. And finally, you get to retrospective motivation. That's when you look back at how far you've come, feel that amazing sense of accomplishment, and decide, yeah, let's keep going. It's a cycle that just keeps feeding itself. Okay, so we've covered the heavy hitters, aptitude and motivation. Now for the really fun part. Let's bust some of the most common myths about what makes a good language learner. Because honestly, there are a ton of ideas floating around out there that just do not hold up when you look at the science. First one up, the extrovert advantage. We all assume that the person who's always talking in class must be learning the most, right? But research, like a really famous study by Lily Wong Fillmore, shows that's just not true. It turns out, if you're a more quiet, observant type of learner, you can be just as successful, maybe even more so, because you're spending all that time really listening and processing the language on a deeper level. And oh boy, what about the biggest myth of them all? The idea that I'm just too old to learn a language. Now, the whole critical period thing is real, especially when it comes to getting a perfect native-like accent. But the story is so much more interesting than that. Because in the beginning stages, adult learners are actually more efficient than kids are. We can use our life experience and what we already know about language to learn way faster at the start. And finally, let's talk about learning styles. You know, the idea that I'm a visual learner or I'm an auditory learner. And look, we all have preferences, that's for sure. But the idea that you can only learn in one specific way, that's pretty much a myth. The research consistently shows that the best approach is a rich mix of different activities. So instead of boxing yourself into one style, try to stretch yourself. Engage with the language in as many different ways as you possibly can. So, after all of that, what does this all actually mean for you on your language learning journey? Let's put these pieces together and lay out a clear path to success based on what the research really shows us. So here's the bottom line. Aptitude, it's a real thing, and it's a strong predictor, but it is absolutely not destiny. Motivation is your engine, and that's something you have control over. You can build it and keep it running. Your personality, introvert, extrovert, somewhere in between, it's not a barrier. Your age just changes the game a bit. It doesn't end it. And maybe most importantly, using good strategies and getting quality instruction can make a huge difference for literally any learner at any age with any profile. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Now that you kind of understand all the different pieces of this puzzle, the cognitive hardware, the motivational engine, all the myths we've busted, I want you to think about your own journey. What is your greatest strength as a language learner?